This episode is brought to you by the University of Warwick's PGCE-I and PGCE IQTS programs, specifically designed to give music teachers the qualification they need to apply for jobs around the world. Stay tuned for more information. Welcome back to the Music Teachers in International Schools podcast. I'm your host, Chris Kulmer, and today my guest is Jeff Tollefson, the Fine Arts Director at Colegio Menor, Quito in Ecuador. And I first heard of Jeff through our mutual buddy, Jefferson Aranda, who featured in episode 17 of the podcast, which was titled The Evolution of Music Teacher Identity from Ecuador to the UAE. And during that episode, Jefferson had referenced his mentor, Jeff Tollefson, a few times. So here we are following another rabbit hole of interconnectedness in the international school music teaching world. Let's get straight into this. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me on the show.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk about it. Let's go.
Okay, let's start with probably my favorite question, which kind of sets everything up. Can you tell us a bit about your background as a musician and as a music educator?
Yeah, I can imagine that it's fun for all these questions for you in these podcasts because it's just, how people get to where they get to in international education is always a great one. I grew up in New Jersey in the United States. I went through the traditional band program route, trumpet player, went through symphonic band, did all of that. I chose to study music education at the University of Northern Colorado. So from there, it was kind of, just moving way across to the Midwest of the United States. It was a fantastic school. I didn't know what I was getting into in the music part of it, very high level music program. I encountered students that had, my colleagues had taken private lessons for years. And I was like, well, I was in band, and it was an awakening there. About in my second year, we started our practicums and interns for being in schools. And those two worlds just mixed really well. And I was fortunate that I was a person that right at that time, I was probably about 19, 20, that I was like, this is what I need to do. I just loved the environment of education, of being able to help students and engage with their learning. When I graduated my undergraduate, I spent my first teaching years in Colorado, in the Denver area. And after a couple of years, I did this typical young 20s guy going, I'm not making enough money. I need to do this. What's next? I need to get out here. And I randomly went to, I did a quick stint in the corporate world, actually, in software technology. And then after that, I was like, this is definitely not as cool as teaching in a school. And I went to a job fair, an international job fair, not very prepared, to be honest with you. I had 2 years of experience and some good ideas, and I thought it would be a good idea to get some interview experience. And I came back out of there and I got like 2 yeses and I don't even know how many nos. And one of them was for a school in the International School of Cairo, I believe, and the other one was for a school here in Ecuador, different than the one that I'm working now, Academia Cotopaxi, fine school here in Quito, Ecuador. And I quit my job and then I said, hey, friends, I'm moving to South America on the equator. And that was that. No real amazing plan, no heady thought out thing. I thought I'd sign a 2-year contract and go back to the US. And it is now 2024. Chris. So I've been, except for one stint that I was out of Ecuador for 3 years, I moved to Ecuador in the year 2000. So I've been here 21 of the last 24 years. And I moved schools during that time and took the opportunity to have a leadership role as the fine arts director here. At the first point, it was a music coordinator, and that expanded. I have a faculty of 28 teachers on staff here. It's a large operation we have going on, but it's fantastic. So that's the quick of it.
That's really cool. I'd love to dig in on a couple of things. Firstly, the job fair thing. Had you heard about international schooling before the job fair, or was it literally just on a whim? You'd heard about this thing called a job fair, or did someone say, hey, you should check this thing out? How did the job fair thing come about in the first place?
Yeah, common. The second one, right? Hey, Jeff. So I know about this international job fair. I've heard that there's more positions that are teachers signed up. You should totally go to check it out. It was literally like that. And I was, what's the worst that could happen? It was good interview experience, a lot of round robin. Yeah, I'd never been in an environment like that. I literally slept in my car the first night. And I just, I went through it. And that was a long time ago. And it was kind of like going through the power corporate job interview circle at that time. But yeah, that's how that came about.
Yeah. So the second thing I'd love to touch on now is your role as a director of fine arts. What does that encompass? Because it's obviously not just music. What else is part of your role? And maybe how much teaching are you doing at the moment in your current role?
Right. So it expanded as it went. The school at its onset already had a well-established visual arts program and an established music program. So those two things were already conceived at the beginning. And then my role was to come in there, and at the first spot was to move the forward program of the music program. And as that developed and through the pandemic and after the pandemic, right now it's expanded to what you would have as visual and media arts on that one side, and then the performing arts, which is music, dance, and drama. So that conglomerate there is in this area of the school. And I lead everything from there, from curricular instruction, teacher supervision, the budget and economics of it, the management of our performing arts facility, all of that. Yeah, it takes an army. I have one class still because I came from the world of band there. Most of these kids, I've been in that spot for a while. I can't let it go. I have to be in the classroom. I think all administrators should always maintain at least one class in their area of expertise that they came. So I still am involved in the Latin jazz band that I've developed over time, and I teach the top level group there. I used to have two classes. The other one was a contemporary music ensemble, which maybe we'll get into later or not, which is basically a rhythm section and vocal group designed for performance and gigging on there that I developed. That's kind of in the room that we're sitting now, where they play in there. But yep, I teach that one class, and it's definitely the best part of my day.
Okay, so let's take a left turn and go back to the intro where I spoke about Jefferson Aranda, because like I said, he spoke about you so many times. And I was like, I got to meet this guy because obviously he's making an impact in Jefferson's life. But yeah, he mentioned you as a mentor to him. So what does that mean to you? What is maybe mentoring another staff member or a friend, I guess, probably by the sound of it as well? What does that mean to you?
It's wonderful to be mentioned in that context, of course, your sense of pride. What it means, it's the Lion King, Chris. It's the circle of life, right? I mean, we work in the arts. I mean, who didn't have a mentor? Who didn't have somebody there to guide you through, and then you to be able to pay it forward and be there? And I strongly believe in that. You need that community, and whether you're in the beginning of your career, midpoint of your career, at the end of your career, that whole cycle, I don't think of it as a straight line. I definitely think of it as a circle on that, and it's very, very important that there's always that, whether it's in your own school, institution, workplace, or outside, that you always have that community of having, I don't know, it's kind of like martial arts too, where you still have like the apprentice, and then you have, your student, and then everybody has the sensei that you're like, oh my gosh, there's that guy, or girl, or person. So that's very, very important, that you always have a setup somewhere, not in your country, somewhere that you can reach to, where there's always that piece to challenge you, to ask questions, to give that person some new ideas.
So can you think of someone in your life then, like right now, that would have been your mentor, that maybe, I don't know, back to your university days or even as a teacher?
Yeah, so here's the fun story. Where Jeff mentioned in his episode 17 and where we met was the place where my mentor is. So this is a person who had, he was the guy. His name is Jay Byron, and he was the guy here in Ecuador. Him and another colleague whose name was Esteban Molina. One came from Berkeley School of Music, and Jay comes from a very high level family background and background of music education in the small place of Ecuador. You wouldn't think that you would have something developed. And those two are fundamental in building not just school programs, but university programs. They're both respective deans of their programs. And when I came back the second time to Ecuador, I was shaken. I was like, oh my gosh, Jay came back. What do I do? And fortunately it was able for me to have a person that I can connect with, somebody that was able to guide me through many steps of the career. Within that breeding ground, I think you'll find this in a lot of places, Chris, that have talent that grows. There's always a system, there's always a plan. It just doesn't come from anywhere. And these senseis, breed others who breed others, and it becomes like this big tree, like a coaching tree. And I think it's the same thing. So we met in that same place. We came from the same places, and it was me paying it forward at this point and saying, "Hey, I've seen this before. Somebody said the same thing to me, and I'm going to say it to you." And I'm sure Jeff is at the point now where it's time for him to say the same thing to others.
That's so cool that you're all in the same room, the same place, like mentoring, passing it down, passing it forward. Super special. So cool to hear that story. So 20 plus years in Ecuador, why have you stayed so long? Like when it was just, I don't know, I'll do a couple of years and then maybe go back or move on. What's kept you there 20 plus years?
Yeah, there's always a personal and family component. So in my case, the obvious answer is my wife is Ecuadorian, and I'm there. Beyond that, as parents, you want something that maybe is different or better than what you had. And so the idea that my son could go to an international school, be bilingual, have a really great tuition package for that matter. He started the school at 3 and he graduated last year. I mean, incredible. And that's an experience that I sure didn't have. Everybody has their background and story. So that's part of it there. And to be honest with you, it's just a great place to be. The school was a fantastic place, Chris, that allowed for a structure and expectation that they wanted, but at the same time, the liberty to say, Jeff, go with this, but if you mess it up, we're going to let you know. Do you know what I mean? And I think not always in all situations you have that. A lot of times your programs are fixed. You have to follow in the channel, do exactly the way it is, and there's no room for one or the other, which is okay. That's definitely one way to go. But in this case, there were some things that I had seen or wanted to try, or in this community of fantastic artists and musicians that we have here, I thought there was a real opportunity, and opportunity takes time. So between that and the family and my son, worked out really well in my case.
A couple of thoughts, I guess, reflections on what you just said there. One is the impact of tenure, having a long-term stint in a place. And often I talk with others in international schools about how long they've been in a school. And the typical idea is kind of to move around a couple of years here, a few years there, which I guess is totally fine. And I guess there's a reason for doing that for many. But it's amazing how often music teachers seem to stay around a bit longer because they, see that they need time to establish something in a school. So it's interesting to hear that that's been part of your journey as well. I guess the second part is that sense of freedom. And it's incredible as well how many people I get to speak to. I'm so fortunate to speak with so many people. And they say the same thing. I get this sense of curricular freedom. And there's all sorts of freedoms, but I guess it's often that they have this freedom to try things. And it's really cool to hear that your admin were like, go for it. We're with you and we'll just tell you when we're not with you anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if you have the same admin, right?
How's that been for you? Have you had lots of changes to your admin or has it been consistent?
I wouldn't say lots of changes, but again, I mean, I've been at this school 17 years. For here, it's been through 4. And again, another one of the famous mentor comments. You got 2 choices. Go somewhere else and see if you can do what that is and leave it there, or stick it out, put in the time, and and you'll get through it. And that's a fundamental piece, Chris, that you're talking on. Everybody knows this, and whether it's music teachers or whatever, making a difference takes time. They're not immediate things. So
yeah, one of the things we often speak about at MTIS is the way that international school music teachers, myself included, come from their home country and they often come with these fixed ideas. Again, I definitely had this situation. I came in, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I've trained to do, and, they think that they have this best way forward or they know, which is, often there's a balance. Maybe there is some things that definitely work. How have you navigated that idea coming into Ecuador? Have you shifted a lot in your approach to music education? How much have you brought from your training and how much do you think has evolved from your context working in Ecuador?
You would never know, I guess, because I couldn't compare myself to me staying. But from the time that I left the United States until now, I mean, it's not even close to everything has changed. The world has changed. Education has changed. I've been embedded in a different culture on a different continent, which has changed. Like you travel around, and international education is so interesting. You meet enough people, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. Like this, look at all these ideas that come out there. And I think it's if anybody's paying attention, like you must change. Like it must be so just completely different. Like I don't know what would provoke you anymore to just keep on doing the same thing that you did that happened before you and before you. With exceptions. I think one exception is that there's still things that are the same. Musicianship is still musicianship. Your artistic quality is still there. Having a good ear is a non-negotiable on certain terms. But as far as like your approach on things or the ideas that you can explore, man, I mean, it's happily so much different. And I hope it gets even more different, which is going to be a little uncomfortable, but cool.
Would you be able to articulate any major changes, like either contextual because you're in Ecuador, or maybe some of those changes that are inevitable over time? Anything at all?
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure everybody listening to this is going to relate to these ones. Whatever your expectation was from where you came from to where you go, like if you're an international teacher, probably got thrown out the window in many of your assignments. And you're like, well, that is not exactly what they said in the interview. And this is definitely not what I signed up for here. I mean, I remember coming from big symphonic band environment, and then my first class, I had 4 kids. And I was like, all right, let's go through the library. And, that wasn't going to take, and that was an immediate shift there. And I think a specific example is that, I think international schools too, in a lot of their places, if you come from large area history side programs, whether it's the United States or the UK or somewhere in certain areas where they're just very developed, you're often going to places that maybe not. Like maybe the city is, maybe the country's not. Maybe the country is, maybe your school is not. Maybe your school has 250 kids, maybe, you know what I mean? And so I think that becomes a big, big distinction on that, And so when you're in the international market, it's often not exactly what you thought it was going to be, but it can definitely be what you want it to become. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm imagining just your example of symphonic band. You might arrive at a school, it's a similar size, but you can't get instruments in the city you're in, or you've got all the kids and you've got some facilities, but you can't get all the instruments, for example, or there's nowhere to perform, or yeah, there's so many changes just in that.
Yeah. Which doesn't mean you can't do it, right? Like if that's your thing, you got to go with your thing. And there's no reason why you can't have that steel drum ensemble somewhere, in Asia because that's your thing and that's your passion and that's what you want to do. Go for it. There's no reason why you can't have, an 8 voice mixed choir with 80 people, and and it doesn't matter if you have 90 people in the school. Like you can make it happen. But again, they're explorations. For me, I had an interest in different musical styles and world music styles. That's why I left to begin with. So I came to Ecuador. You have a band. It's this many people. I'm in Latin America. I have a band, Latin band. I like jazz. I want to get Latin jazz band. I mean, it was fairly organic. What's the type of repertoire that we're going to do here? I don't know. Where am I? What goes on around here? So that kind of dictated that, and then in this case, it just happened to work with the instrumentation, and then it grew there. When it came into music technology, it was the same thing. Kids started getting exciting for this, or I don't have a drum set in my house. I got an electric drum set, or I don't have that. I have this pads. Has anybody ever thought about doing this type of class? And I think when you're awake and you're present with what's happening in your community, I think that you can definitely see what those needs are. And so it's an interesting balance between what the needs are and the culture of the community you are and what your passion is to bring. And you should absolutely go with it. Always.
So, do you have any particular strategies or ways you went about engaging with the local music scene? Did you have a strategy, or did you just go for it and see what happened?
The strategy in my case was gigging. Yeah. I mean, That was it. I was like, I don't know. I don't know anything about salsa, but I know this and I know that. And I know a friend who does that. Maybe they'll let me in on this gig somehow. And if it's not gigging, then the answer to that is your friends who are gigging. And if it's not that, it's going out. And if it's not that, it's like, what are you exploring that's somehow related to the curricular things that you're doing? So if you're, whether you're teaching theory or general music or whatever that is, uh, what are the folk songs around the region where you're in? You know what I mean? And just having an interest in being in your community, I think, is fundamentally important, which is difficult because not all international schools have either that percentage, or they do have that percentage, or they may not want to, whatever their engagement is or where they're geographically located in the city, might not be easy. But my particular approach was finding the community that I wanted, and some of those people were already in the school, and some of those people were gigging musicians or artists that required me needing to have some survival skills on language, which later turned into being completely comfortable in that. But it's that. It was extending itself out in the community, Chris, like for sure. And I think it's a must.
A bunch of MTIIS community members have successfully secured international school music teaching jobs after completing their online PGCE-I or PGCE IQTS courses through the University of Warwick. If you're looking for a university qualification to teach music in an international school, this is the best option I've seen so far. To learn more and register, visit warwick.ac.uk/CTE. That's warwick.ac.uk/CTE. So let's talk about the space you're in, and feel free to extend this wherever you want to take it. And you might even correct me here, because before we recorded and in our chats prior to this, you wanted to speak about this idea of creative media spaces in the arts and its place in international education. So maybe take us where you like with this concept, creative media spaces in international schools.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, it's my favorite topic. It's the one thing that you said of things that are changing, the dynamic of large musical ensembles require certain things that are flexible and some that are not very flexible. Smaller types of groups and spaces, whether you're teaching third graders or high schoolers, uber creative spaces allow this and take away that. I think the excitement today in education is being highly sensitive to the needs for youth to be able to have creative spaces to express themselves. We're still in a place where they may be in a school where they're going from class to class to class to class, and the structure is still rigid. And, for us, sometimes we forget I do, after all these years, that, the kids just had 5 classes before you with 5 me's saying the same things, and nobody asked for their opinion for about 5 hours. And that can be something, man, and you forget about it. Or on the other side, maybe it's the opposite and they need a little structure. So the space that I'm in right now, I think that there's 2 elements to creative learning, to creative spaces, an innovative approach to that. And I think one is the physical space category, and I think the other is the mental space and curricular design, which is directly related to your lesson planning. So if I could, I think I'd go between the 2. Physical spaces, there's a lot that goes into that, what your resources are in the school, what you can do. But I think the first thing is it's definitely time to update the classroom. I think we're fortunate that we work in the arts, that we're less prone to this, but it's sad that we still have desks and chairs and rows, and this person that might be elevated at the front of the room while everybody else is in this their spot. That's fine and useful in some cases for direct instruction, and you need that. If you're in a musical context with larger ensembles and you still need to have your rows and your purpose is for direct instruction, that works. But if we're talking about creative spaces, I think my first one, you need to mix it up, right? So there's a mix it up element that if that's your purpose that day, do it that way. If your purpose is to have a creative conversation or a dialogue, I think the physical spaces, I don't know how well you can see it, but I mean, obviously there's a console here. Between here and the rhythm section, that can be connected or not connected to the console. In the middle of the space is completely blank. And whatever teacher's in there needs to put together and take down whatever need you do in that space. So if they're having a jam session, I would expect the teacher not be here, but be in the middle. They would not be in this space. They should be in a collaborative coaching space because that's your role. The kids should be either in a semicircle in a place where they have eye contact. If we are in one of our media rooms upstairs, we used to have the desks in rows and the big desk and the big MIDI keyboard and the iMac and all of that. And now it's completely open. They have their benches. They have to bring their own device, which I'm sure many schools do. But the desks are now in pods. So now there are 4 people there and 4 people here. So you can like physically look at each other. The teacher has no desk in one of the rooms so that they have to move around and be there. I think that's a really important one. And if you're looking for anything from improvisation to the jam session to just a discussion, the physical space must change and it must be designed in a way that it's not such a pain for the teacher to have to like move it all the time. You want it to be an open space, less cluttered too. And again, there's always those challenges, but the more that you can do it, I think that's one, is the physical space. And then, yeah, how are we doing on that? I'm sure you've seen lots of physical spaces, you know.
Yeah, cool. I have. And maybe I'll just jump in on that because we have this series that'd be really cool to come in and do at your school one day. But we have this series of music department tours where we go around and have a look at different spaces for this reason, just to show what could be done with the space, or you could try this storage idea or arrangement of chairs, or get rid of everything and just start with a blank canvas. So this really connects nicely to that. But I think you've hit the nail on the head in so many ways because it's not getting stuck. It's being open and being responsive to what you want the students to experience or what musical experience you want to create, and being open to changing that as and when you need to, right?
Yeah, and I've seen that series, when you're walking through people's performance spaces and you hope that they don't look like the ones that we had. Even if you were fortunate to have a really beautiful space, there's so many options that you see in some of these videos in the school where it almost always means that you have to convince an administrator to redesign a space at some point. And they want to. A lot of times rooms were darker. This room behind me used to have no windows at all. It was fully like just carpeted because it was cheaper to just put carpet up. And I couldn't get them to change it. Oh, no, we can't really update it because of this and that. And you don't really need windows. It's fine. You know where I got it, Chris? They changed the space when we did a study on allergies. And because they were carpets all over, there was just too much dust and stuff in the rooms. And kids started to complain, whatever, the teachers, or I have, some sinus thing, whatever. And then all of a sudden it became an open space. So it was a little bit backwards, but hey, whatever works for you.
Yeah, that's actually a great tip. If anyone's got carpeted walls, just get an allergy test done and go from there.
Oh, but I strongly recommend it. Either like an allergy test or bring in, measure how many decibels are in that room. And show it like how literally loud is it in here for what I'm doing. And schools that maybe they just open and they have the walls in there. A third tip is to like have your administrators have a meeting in that room that sounds so bad, and then nobody will ever, everybody gets annoyed and physically tired because you can't even have a conversation. And then at the end of it, well, you can imagine what my 7th graders feel like right now. You know what I mean? Or the opposite. You have like a faculty meeting in like an incredibly acoustically great room. And then the high school principal's like, man, it's awesome in here. What's going on? Maybe the science classes should be like that. That's definitely physical spaces.
Cool, great. What about mental space?
Mental space. So mental space, curricular design, lesson planning. And this is a lot of trial and error. People come into the classroom, oh, Jeff, how'd you get this to work? By failing massively many times for many years. You know what I mean? And then maybe they came in the day where it worked. Maybe they came in the day where it didn't. But I think there's a couple on things. One is what I said before. It's being a coach or facilitator instead of being the teacher and the director, unless that's what you need. If I'm in the middle of a musical theater thing and I need to have a director and everybody needs to follow something right now, that's fine. But in a creative space, which is the topic we're talking about, you need to be at the door. You need to say hello to the kids, not wait for the kids to come all the way across your room and say hi or not say anything because you're behind your desk. And I think That's on us. I don't think that's on the kids. So you being there is a mental space. All of us forget kind of where our spots are. Like, would you sit next to the drummer and like freak him out? Like, why are you sitting next to me? Man? Like, why is the teacher sitting so close on this side? Or did you change your spaces? Do you walk around the room? Do you roam? And I think that's very common when you look at creative spaces. When we're facilitators in there, we're walking around. We're checking stuff out. We're asking questions. You're not having that population come to you. You're going to them. And I think that's a mental space. From a curricular perspective, one is when you start your lesson, everybody's want to have the goal of the day or your framing question or however you want to put it. But in a creative space, you don't have to mention it at the beginning. So instead of saying, kids, today we're going to be learning about MIDI, it would be way more powerful to just have them come in and start with an activity that's related to that, where kids just kind of get down and start going. And on the screen behind you, all of a sudden you see these little bricks just popping up on the screen of people inputting stuff, and then stopping the activity, having a quick reflection and saying, what'd you see? What's going on? What do you think we did? What's happening? And then the framing question comes next. I think we all fall into that habit of having to state what we're going to do first. And I don't think you always need to do that in a creative space. I think you need to be creative first and have it a go. The other mental space is always leaving time at the end of the class, which is so much easier said than done. We're all guilty of the last 2 minutes of the class. I can get this done one more time around. And really disciplining yourself in your lesson planning to have that 5 minutes of reflection and inquiry to lead what you're going to do the next class in your creative space is super important. And if you don't ask the kids that, then it's not really creative because you're the one kind of bridging that gap. And again, easier said done, but just being super mindful of that, this is what you're trying to create, and having that piece at the beginning and piece at the end wrap around that immediately changes the environment of the class that you're in.
Yeah, there's probably a better term for this, but the words I've been using lately is front loading. Like, we always feel as teachers, as the teacher, the fountain of all knowledge at the front, that we have to front load with so much stuff. But maybe, if I'm understanding it right, what you're suggesting is, and I've heard this before, let's just do stuff. Like, let's do it. Let's do the thing. Let's play with MIDI. Like, get in the piano roll and move some things around. And then, oh, do you guys actually know what this is? Or we get some questioning going, and then it just becomes this process of discovery rather than starting with a framework or a strict structure that maybe doesn't promote creativity, which is what you're talking about, creative spaces. So I really like that. I think they're really good tips. Anything else you would want to add to the mental space idea?
I mean, Chris, you hit it on the head. You hit it on the head when you said front loading, right? And that's what it's about. If we're looking to engage creativity, how many times has this happened to all of us in education, where you spend like this 3 minute incredible explanation of everything that you're doing, and then your 3 minutes, because you were so excited about it, turned into 5 minutes, and then you're like, you guys, we're going to be doing this, and this, and that. And then you stop that, you feel really proud about your ability to explain it, and you've explained it so well. And then the kids go, what do you say? And then you go, all right, everybody get to it. And the guy goes, what do we do? What's the first step? Like all the time. And I think as time goes on, that it's not even a retention thing. They're just so used to doing things the other way. I'm going to download the game, I'm going to play the game, and then I'm going to figure out how to play the game like a little bit later. Nobody reads the directions of the game first. In fact, the tutorial works so that it's like partway through it, right? Brilliant. We need to learn stuff from these things. Why are we doing it the other way? And I think the front loading does that. You go right in there, you just give it a go, and then you've already created this safe space of, we're just like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I know the framework of which it's going to happen in. That's front loading. And then from there, you get out of the way. It's like us saying, we got to stop talking so much. Just go. And then the kids will ask the question, or they get used to that.
Yeah, one reflection that I might just add here, and we can chop it later if it doesn't go anywhere, but we've been doing a fair bit of work with MTIS around music technology and how we can look at the learning of music technology. And one of these areas is really looking at electronic musicians and how electronic musicians learn, so music producers, etc. And what we find is that one of the key things that comes out in research, and this is looking at the research of how electronic musicians learn, so studying their learning process. And one step in their learning process is what is often defined as tinkering. It's that idea of like getting a piece of gear, whether it's hardware or software or whatever, and just literally try everything, turn all the knobs, press all the buttons, try stuff and make mistakes and try and sort of break the thing, and then go from there. How does that idea resonate with what you're talking about?
Well, from a jazz perspective, it's the same thing. Tinkering, noodling, they might call it, or just giving it a go. What do kindergartners do when they're in a Montessori school? They don't get explained how to tie shoes and then this is like the how to do the buttons. They're just like they open the door, there's the space, go people, and then it comes after that. And we forget that. I got ear pulled many times from my mentor going, really well framed lesson on improvisation, but you spoke too much. You front loaded all this theory on it. And by the time they wanted to do what you were doing, like they had just too much stuff in their head. And it was like you put too many rules and then you told them to not do any rules. And so the tinkering is supposed to be after you tinker, you add, you correct, you improve, you reflect, you add on it, you add on it. And then the famous, jazz thing, the whole idea is that eventually you get the knowledge in there so you can stop thinking about the knowledge that you have. But yeah, you can't be just uploading all the music theory first on that. String players and orchestras, Chris, you walk into the room and you just hear noodling, you just hear tinkering, you just hear the sounds of bowing and going. I think it's awesome. Some people, it bothers them. It's like, oh, it's so like not organized in here. But it is, it's fantastic. And then when something, whether it's your cue is a bell, a ringtone, a metronome click, whatever, then something else happens. But tinkering is fundamental to education.
So I think if anyone's listening that would like to explore this more or would like some strategies, I guess this is a question to you, Jeff. Is there a good way to get in touch with you? Like, what is the best way to get in touch with you at the moment if someone wants to talk to you more about some ideas, especially maybe in your role in such a big team? I'm sure you're talking about this a lot. What is the best way to get in touch with you if someone wants to have a bit more of a chat about this?
Same way you and I connected. I think LinkedIn's the same. You could just look for Jeff Tollefson right on LinkedIn. If not, I don't know if we can pop in my email there. We can go that way. But I think that's a surefire way. I think and congratulations on you and all your work and just being able to connect everybody to bring these ideas. I think it's super exciting, Chris, at the time that we're in now. I remember that there was a time where everybody was worried about music education and the arts and they're defunding and cutting things. I strongly believe that we're going to be the last people standing. I think that we're going to incorporate creative learning to what kids still want, to AI, to whatever those things are. We haven't been afraid of tinkering or changing things for a very long time. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's only going to get better. And so I congratulate you on being able to connect that world. And through LinkedIn, I guess it's in the title of the software. Happy to talk to anybody who's looking to skip the 175 mistakes yearly that I made and kind of go to the quicker version.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, let's leave both. Let's put your LinkedIn and an email for people to use to get in touch with you. I've got a couple of other questions, but I kind of feel like this is a really nice point to leave it. So I won't ask any more questions, but is there anything you wanted to say? Any questions, thoughts, comments before we wrap this thing up?
I mean, the biggest thing is what I just spoke of before, which is I think is that I hope that everybody continues to be motivated in our field. I think it's going to be extremely exciting in the next 10 to 15 years. I think it's going to be an awesome type of work. I think schools are going to figure some of these things out, that a lot of the ways that they're doing things are not working. And the schools that are coming up with innovative ways to do stuff, they're going to really latch on to artistic minds and brains. And I think that creative mindset of doing, whether you want to call it growth mindset, whether you want to call it design thinking, whatever you want to go on there, I think our our brains are already wired to it is going to be super exciting. So I think we're looking good. I think things are looking up, Chris.
Yeah, I think that's why I like the international school music teaching space so much. It's such an exciting space for that to happen, what you've just described. Speaking to people in this space is such a joy because I feel like there's an energy globally that you just articulated that we can all really tap into. So I'm excited by what you just said, and I hope everyone listening in is also excited. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time for this. I know it's a busy time of year with musicals and all sorts of concerts and stuff going on with the work you're doing with the team. I've loved getting to know your work and what you're doing, and I hope we can catch up in person one day somewhere around the world. But in the meantime, yeah, thanks so much, and really, really appreciate you coming on board and having this conversation.
No, I've appreciated the conversation, and I'm sure we'll see each other somewhere. So, people looking to come to South America, very cool place. Come on down, and I'm sure I'll see everybody around. I'm sure we'll hook up, and I look forward to it, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Music Teachers in International Schools podcast. Listen to other episodes by visiting mtiis.com or learn more about our community on Facebook by simply searching for Music Teachers in International Schools. If you know someone who you think I should get on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at chriskoelma.com, ChrisKoelma.com. See you next time.